right, I think we're live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Shimano School. My name is JP DeRose. I'm here with Captain Mike Roy, and we're going to be talking Northeast today, but I'm going to let a bunch of you kind of file in here because it's going to take some time. I am going to warn everybody ahead of time. We have an impending tornado here in Ontario that's heading our way, so it is possible that I'm going to completely lose power in the house, and if I lose power, this is probably going to go down. So if it does, don't panic. It's just my house being blown away or something like that. But I wouldn't worry too much about it. It's actually
doesn't happen.
Yeah, the power grid sucks up here, but the tornadoes are very unlikely, which is a good thing. So, Mike, how you doing, bud?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. We appreciate having you. I mean, you got the fall run happening in the Northeast. So, folks, we're going to be talking all about the Northeast fishery. And it's going to be a good one because there is a plethora of opportunity this time of year in the Northeast. And I was speaking to Mike earlier, and you're talking stripers, blues, albies, bottom fishing for tog, bottom fishing for black sea bass. So this is the time of plenty. It is everywhere, really, when fall hits. It's usually a great time to go fishing. So I'm going to give you guys a couple more seconds here. If you could do me a favor, click in the comment section. Let me know where you're checking in from. I do this every 2 weeks with you guys. And like I said, this is another edition of Shimano School. And our goal tonight is to educate. So if you've got questions, feel free to put them up. There's already people coming up with with questions already, so that's great. So if you got questions about the fishery, or you got questions about product, or you got questions about how to contact Mike here, all good, all fair play. If you got questions about our competitions product, we can't help you because we are diehard Shimano fans, and that's what we use exclusively. So there's Garrett from Miami. How you doing, bud? Slow pitch jigging setup tips, one thing. So Blaine Anderson, what up, boys? Hey, Blaine.
What's up, Blaine?
So there is, first, the person who just put this up while we're letting people in, hailing from New York, slow pitch jig setups. All of our videos that we do for Shimano School live on both our Facebook channel and our YouTube channel, and they're up there. I had a phenomenal slow pitch jig talk with Benny Ortiz, who is one of the originators of the entire thing. So do yourself a favor. You can head over to either our videos on our Facebook Shimano page or our YouTube and watch that video. You'll get a ton of great tips. I mean, Benny spilled his guts on some great setups and techniques for slow pitch jigging. So there we go. William, any videos of the stuff in use? Okay, so why don't we get things rolling? Mike, John from Buffalo's in. Who else is in here? Hailing from New York. All right, a bunch of people who know you, so this should be fun. We're talking Northeast. What area, Mike, are you out of?
So we are based out of Connecticut, specifically Old Saybrook, Connecticut. We basically fish all of Eastern Sound. I do poke around the Western Sound a little bit in the early spring, but pretty much it's Eastern Sound to the Rhode Island border is where we fish most. I have done a lot of fishing into Rhode Island as well, but primarily it's Connecticut, which would also include New York waters because we share the Long Island Sound with New York, and then we obviously have the largest river in New England is the Connecticut River, and we sit right at the mouth of that river. That river starts in Canada. It's a 420-mile long river, so obviously that's a huge highway for bait and fish, and there's a lot of good fishing to be had where the river and the Long Island Sound merge together. So we have that.
Okay, so I've got a bit of experience there because I was blessed enough to have the opportunity to film with Captain Blaine Anderson in those exact stomping grounds. You guys are from the same area basically, and I did a striper show in June when I guess the Menhaden spawn was just ending or whatever was going on there, but phenomenal fishery. And you're absolutely right, the Connecticut River has got an immense amount of bait and game fish. But what's going on right now in your fishery?
Yeah, so we're coming into the fall run. So I guess you can say, when you say fall run in anywhere in the Northeast and New England, you think about topwater action, schools of bait on the surface, whether it's small bait like anchovies, juvenile silversides, juvenile butterfish. I mean, all the small stuff, we're going to have fish feeding on the surface, and also large, full-grown adult menhaden And the great thing is it's like a smorgasbord right now. It's just starting, but we'll have big stripers, small stripers, big bluefish, the gator blues. We have the small blues. We have the bottom fishing's great. So black sea bass, blackfish, or tautog season that opens October 10th and goes all the way to the end of November. And then we have the false albacore and bonita run as well. So you have a lot of different options.
Okay, and the Albie, actually, we've already got a question regarding the Albie.
Mm-hmm.
So V from Rhode Island saying, where's the Albie at?
That's a good question. They, you got to remember, albies are really like a highly migratory species. So they are all over the place. The best advice I could say is to follow the bait. So when you have small bait like bay anchovies, silver sides, peanut, what we call peanut bunker, juvenile bunker, and when we say bunker in Connecticut, that means Menhaden. I know down south in Rhode Island, they call them pogies. Bunker is called Connecticut and New York. We call them bunker for whatever reason. It's all the same thing. But yeah, so they're going to be following the bait. The albies, yeah, I guess I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with them. I mean, they are spectacular. They're a lot of fun. Great light tackle fish, because in the Northeast, you're not going to find an inshore fish that's going to fight as hard or as fast as albies do. But you know, when they are, for me personally, I fish what's available. So if the albies are running down in Point Judith, I'm not going to go drive 40 miles to go catch albies when I'm driving over phenomenal striper fishing. You know, so I'm more opportunistic. So I'm going to fish what's running best in my area. So, and the other thing with albies, you know, their behavior can change pretty dramatically. So there's days when albies are super finicky, and there's days when they're very easy to catch. My advice personally, if they're really finicky and they're lasher and they're not hitting, I'll go fish for something else. I won't beat my head against the boat. But yeah, I mean, right now you're coming into prime albie season, and finding the small bait is going to be key.
All right, and since we're on the topic of albies, I know you have a few setups there. Would you happen to have one of your Albie setups with you there?
Absolutely.
All right, let's talk about that, because I haven't personally done the Albie thing, but I know how popular it is in the Northeast because they're plentiful, they pull hard, they're beautiful fish, great sport fish. So what are you using if someone wants to try Albie fishing? What should they be setting themselves?
Yeah, what makes the albies so unique is they're only are in the Northeast for a short time period. So that's starting right now. We're just, they've been around. We've been catching them. So that started right around the 1st of September. And you should expect them to stay around. Now, I've caught them. The latest, I've actually caught them up to mid-November. But typically, they'll be around through October. Now, they're very weather dependent. So one big storm could turn them on, and another big storm could turn them off and push them out. So when they're around, you want to go fishing for them. The go-to setup right here is going to be a Shimano Stratic, either 4,000 or 5,000. I run this with 15-pound Power Pro Super Slick. Thin diameter line is going to cast really well, cut the wind really well. And the rod I really like is this G Loomis E6X inshore rod, and this is the 844 SF model right there. And what makes this rod so great for albies is these E6X rods have a fast taper. So when we're throwing small lures, such as like a real popular lure is a 5-inch soft plastic right here. When you're throwing these, you need a rod with a faster taper that's going to load, and you can really punch light soft plastics into the wind. So, and again, with a 15-pound braid, it's going to be able to cast well. Distance is fairly important because albies, they're running so fast, and sometimes you're going to have a big school blow up, and you want to be able to hit them. You don't want to be caught with, if you're running too heavy a line or a real soft action rod, you're not going to really be able to punch those lures and drive them into the wind. And speaking of lures that cast really good, this is another one of my go-to albie lures. I mean, the two top producers are going to be those small soft plastics, and right here, and you can see we've been catching a lot of fish on this one. This is the Shimano Cult Sniper jig. This is a 42-gram jig, but these small jigs really, when it's in windy, rough conditions, I really like throwing the metal. If it's greasy, calm, real calm conditions, I like the plastics. But the reason why this one's so beat up is that we've been using this for bluefish, stripers, and sea bass. I mean, so they really are a catch-all type of lure.
Yeah, and those Colt Sniper jigs cast a country
Oh
mile.
my God. Yeah, you actually have to, word of caution, be careful you don't hit another boat with them, because they do cast that far. They're dangerous.
Garrett's asking, is that a Siwash you got on the Sniper? What are you doing with it? What are you rigging? Because I noticed you took it comes with a treble standard out of the box.
Yep. So typically what I do, and you could run the treble, I typically run, this is an inline, this particular hook is a VMC 2.0 or 3.0 inline hook. I find that when we're vertical jigging these, we are catching a lot of bluefish on them, stripers, and sea. So we're getting a good mix and albies. I find, one, it's significantly easier to unhook a fish, especially if you're dealing with bluefish. I think the hookup percentage wise, they're both good. I mean, the treble and the single hook, I think the single hook does less damage to the fish, and I think it works really well on this lure.
I agree. I believe wholeheartedly, if you're doing fish that you can catch numbers of, or when you get them in the boat are going to thrash themselves, the trebles just tear them up. And I've done the line trick on enough people to know it gets into people as well. So that single hook is definitely a better option. So people are absolutely agreeing with you. Austin saying he loves the Albie run, such an adrenaline rush. And V said to say great advice about the Albie fishing. So true about what you said about the storm pushing them out. So that's awesome there. Good start, folks. Richie Rogers saying Connecticut tuning in, tight lines.
Yeah.
So, again, folks, this is another episode of Shimano School. My name is JP DeRose. We're joined by Captain Mike Roy. Mike, when people want to find you, what's the easiest way to get a hold of you?
Oh, yeah, it's realcastcharters.com, real spelt with 2 E's, pun intended, obviously. So, Real Cast Charters on Instagram. I have a YouTube channel as well. So anything, and then my cell phone's on all those platforms, so people can call, text, or email me as well.
There you go. And obviously more people tuning in here. Sheboygan, Wisconsin, Chasing a Bass is in here. So we have other questions. So folks, if you do have questions, and it doesn't have to be about Albies, it could be about stripers, it could be about those big gator blues that they get around this time of year, or you want to know about tog fishing or black sea bass fishing, hit your questions up in the comment section. If you could also do me a favor, click share on the post. That helps us get the word out so we can keep doing these things. Or if you have a buddy who is interested in fishing the Northeast, or that does fish the Northeast, maybe not all that well, it would be a good idea to tag them here, because there's going to be some great information tonight on what we're talking about. Here's one that's not really related to your fishery, but John Lastly's asking, where can I send my bait casters for a clean and repair through Shimano Service Center? There's 2 service locations that Shimano runs themselves. One is in South Carolina, one's in California. So depending where you live, John, if you are like me and you're a Canuck, we have one of the best ones right here in Peterborough at Shimano's Canadian head office. We got our own Chris Giles who does all our reels for us there. So go on the website, look for Shimano Service Centers, send them in. It is an unbelievable service. And if there's anything going on with your reel, they will find it and fix it. Or if you just need a tune-up, it's a great way to make sure they last forever. So try that out. Go to the website. All right. So we talked Albies, and that would be the smallest of the upper water column fish that you're targeting this time. Mm-hmm. Here's one right here from Marco on our YouTube channel. He's saying, any tips on finicky striper schools? Was at Harkness in Waterford. There were fish everywhere, but wouldn't hit anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so stripers do get finicky. I think what you're going to find is as the water temperatures start to drop, which they haven't really dropped too much yet. You know, the sound water is still like 70 degrees, but as that water starts to drop down into the 60s, you're going to find the fish do get more aggressive. Now, so there's a few things to talk about here. You know, one is when you're dealing with finicky fish, finesse tactics do work really well. So going back to the Albie setup, fishing the light rods here, like the E6X inshore rod, and throwing smaller, lighter baits will really come into, sometimes that's what's going to get bites. So throwing either a small soft plastic or a small topwater lure, like this This is the Cult Sniper. Not the Splash Walk. I can't think of the name. But the when you're fishing smaller lures like this, and fish are being finicky, a lot of times they do draw more strikes. And with these, when you could walk the dog and you could get non-mechanical action, so you could really get that side-to-side action, stop, pause, change the speed and direction. A lot of times that will trigger a reaction strike. So when you're dealing with finicky fish, you have to make them react to the bait. So small stuff, changing speed and direction will often draw your strikes. Also, one thing that we need to realize about stripers is that they don't feed 24/7. So, and I think that this doesn't get talked a lot about, but their aggression level does change. So when fish are in high aggression, you're going to be able to throw a lure and they're just going to smash it, right? But when they're in low aggression, they can be really hard to catch, and sometimes that's where you're going to need a live bait, or you might even have to chum them up and get them fired up. One thing too is from fishing with and using side imaging, we will mark really big schools of fish, like hundreds, even thousands of stripers in a school, and they just aren't feeding. Now, it could be time of day. So I typically, first light, last light, they're higher aggression. Could be tide too. So sometimes if they're not biting and you're at slack tide, wait for that tide to turn. If you're at the end of the tide, you might just have to wait. If it's the end of the outgoing, you might have to wait for the start of the incoming tide. So that's, your tide, wind, change of conditions is probably what's going to turn them on and off.
There you go. There's some great advice, Marco. Hopefully that helps you out. And I assume that was the high pitch walk that you had in your hand.
High pitch walk. Yeah, I couldn't think of the name of it.
Yeah, dude. It happens to me all the time. Don't worry.
This is about 5 inches. It weighs is it about 1.25 ounces, I think. But I mean, this is a great lure when fish are on small bait, like they're on peanut bunker or finger mullet. And sometimes they don't want to hit the big 7 and 9 inch stuff. So you got to downsize your tackle a little bit. And sometimes that really makes a difference. And I mean, typically, obviously you'll get more strikes from smaller fish, but you will occasionally pull some big fish on small lures as well.
Yeah. Elephants eat peanuts, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And that's the 130, 5 1/8, right?
That's it. Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. All right. So there's some great advice there. I'm going to go backtrack here a bit. Garrett had another question earlier that I just kind of flew over as we were introducing things, but he wants to know what's the best reel for bottom fishing. Garrett, if you can let me know what area you're from, we could probably dial this, or what species. But let's talk a little bit. You've got some great bottom fishing there, whether it's togs or black sea bass. Trinidad or Talica lever drag or star drag?
So typically for what we do, we use the Trinidads, the Toriums for bottom fishing. I use the Tranks as well. So this is a size 14 Torium right here. I use this a lot. It's got 50-pound Power Pro Super Slick on it. It's nice, lightweight. I don't like to use a big, bulky reel. Now this is just set up for 3-weighing bucktail jigs out in deeper water in the like if you're fishing an area like the Race where you have a lot of fast-moving current. But I use this for live lining bunker. I would use this for bottom fishing. So if I was fishing for blackfish, dropping crabs to the bottom, this is a really good setup for fishing big live baits in the bottom, or if you're fishing crabs for tog and blackfish, or if you're drifting in areas where you're using bucktail jigs or diamond jigs. And this is on a Terramar XX. This is the TXNC 70H, so it's the heavy power. Really like this rod a lot. It's a really good for what we call 3-weighing. It just refers to when we're fishing a bait or a lure off the bottom. We have this 3-way swivel here. So we have about a 5-foot leader. Let's see if I get this in the camera. There we go. Okay. 3-way swivel right here. And this is attached to this end goes to the 5-foot leader, and this would go to your bait or to a bucktail jig. You have a short piece right here with a perfection loop, and that's going to go to your sinker. And the nice thing about the loop is it allows you to adjust the weight of your sinker depending on wind and current and drift speed. And then obviously this end goes to your running line. But yeah, I like the star drags for that, for my bottom fishing. And then the other one I mentioned as well is the I will fish the tranks. Now this is different. This is more of a bait caster. So typically I use the tranks for when we're live lining big bunkers. I do like the bait caster because it's push button. So it's easy to pay line out and take line in because you're doing a lot of that as the bait's running towards the boat or swimming away from the boat. So this is the Tranks 400 right here. And then another rod I'll use is the G Loomis IMX. This is the number 4 power. It's a 904 CMF. So
that's a phenomenally great rod for so many things. And I guess for you being a guide, having a Tranks that has a line guide probably makes things a little easier than when you're running something like, a Trinidad or something where they have to pay attention and stack the line with their thumb.
Absolutely. That and also the thing I like about the Tranks is we'll actually lob the sometimes we're fishing the full size adult Menhaden. So they weigh about a pound or so, and we'll have to lob them out away from the boat. And the bait caster it is easier because it doesn't backlash as much as the traditional reels do. So it does make it easy if you got to lob that big bait out there.
Too. Yeah, absolutely. Well, the VBS system, the variable braking system in those just make them more dialable for casting and reducing backlashes. Where it is, if you're not seasoned at it, casting a traditional, conventional reel that's free spooling, I mean, if you don't tighten down the spool tensioner, it can be challenging, right? It just keeps rolling. And they hold so much more line, those big reels, that the mass of that line, it's that kinetic energy. It just wants to keep rolling.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And this on the Torium, if you don't know, this is how you would adjust your spool tension right there.
Yeah. So you can tighten that down, and that would help with your casting, but it'll also hurt on your free lining if you're free lining fish. So.
Yeah. So you have to find that threshold. Yeah.
So Garrett, basically, I mean, for what these guys are doing, the star drag, which kicks out up to 24 pounds of drag, that Tranks is probably around 18 pounds, but 18 to 24 pounds of drag is perfect for what they're fishing for. But if you
more
are
than
fishing,
enough,
yeah. If you're fishing for something bigger, that's when the lever drag is going to come in because they will get up to 40 or 50 pounds of drag depending on the drag curve or the cam you got in them. All right, so let's keep going here, see if there's some new ones. Oh, East South Florida, mostly snapper and grouper, if it finds my bait. Okay, yeah, so with the grouper, the Torium PGs would be a great place to look as well. They got a little bit more drag on them and their lower gear ratio, a lot more torque. And he says he has a Trinidad 20, so you're well set up. But yeah, you should take a look at Torium. Came out with a PG a couple years ago. Power gear. It's got a big, nice handle on it for hard cranking.
Yeah.
You have that one?
Yeah. I have it we use it for trolling. It actually works great for that.
Yeah. That would be if you want to do that. If you don't want to go to a lever drag, and if you want to go to a lever drag, you got a couple of options. Obviously, the Talicas, but more so now, even the Speedmasters, which are a 2-speed, which is great for bottom fishing as well. All right.
Those groupers down there are like Art to Tog on steroids.
Yes.
The way I think of them, yeah.
For me, they're like smallmouth on like major steroids. They look like a smallmouth. They taste better than a smallmouth, though, I will say that.
Yeah.
All right. So hopefully that helps you, Garrett. You're welcome. V's back again. So any rod you'd recommend for trolling for striper? I mainly use tube and worms.
Yeah, so I would use so I actually have one of those the Torium PGs. It's the number 16, and we'll use that when we troll. And I actually have that on this same rod. This rod it really is a great rod. This Terramar Double X. Again, it's the TXNC 70H. So 7-foot rod, heavy action. And what I like about it is it's not too stiff because you don't want to be trolling with I don't want a pool cue. You want a little flex to the tip. But at the same time, you need to have enough backbone to so the rod's not folding over as you're especially if you're trolling like a umbrella rig or something heavy. Tubes aren't that heavy. Now, I don't know what you're running, if you're running a keel weight or if you're running lead core. If you're running lead core, you want to go with one of those bigger size Toriums. But this rod, what I was saying, has enough backbone to handle and put the brakes on a larger fish, but it still flexes at the tip. So it's got the perfect action of not being too soft and not being too fast.
Yeah, and that's the Terramar Double X. So that's a Spiral X High Power X blank. So that is the latest technology from Shimano that came out. And if you haven't picked up a Double X rod, what you'll probably notice right away with them is that they feel incredibly light.
That's what I was just going to say. Yeah.
But they are incredibly powerful.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
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 That's a great setup.
Yeah. This is great. And this, you know, what's great about this is we'll fish this live lining bunker in the Connecticut River, and we'll do this out in the race, deep water, where we're 3-weighing a bunker with a 16-ounce sinker. So we could handle, you could still hang a 16 ounces of lead off the rod without the rod just, you know, some rods are just too soft and they just double over, which you don't want, obviously. So this has it's got a really nice taper to it.
Perfect. And we have another one of our, this guy, John A. Buffalo John. I call him Buffalo John, but he's been at all of these Shimano schools. So hopefully you're doing well there, John. He said he's also found fly fishing with Klausers when targeting finicky stripers at Harkness. So
sure.
Yeah, the fly fishing, I mean, that's as stealthy as approach, finesse as you could probably get.
This is prime time, like for fly fishing in the Northeast, particularly in Long Island Sound. This is the prime time for it. Is the fall run, because these are when the fish are at the highest aggression level. What's interesting about fishing in Long Island Sound is that there's kind of when you're fishing in the rivers, right? So you say you're in the Housatonic River, Connecticut River, or all the smaller rivers. Stripers are always more difficult to catch in those rivers. Like in the spring, the fish are incredibly hard. Now, and there's a number of reasons why, and it varies, but it could be there's less oxygen in the water. The fish are highly pressured because they're concentrated in a smaller area, and there's a lot of boat pressure on them. You know, they've seen that white lure or whatever it is, the soft plastic, a million times. It could be that there's less salinity, you know, where there's a number of factors, a ton of bait. They're always around the bait where you put live bait out and they have no interest in touching it. But you go from the river to Long Island Sound, which is a massive estuary, right? Massive bay. It's 100 miles, 110 miles wide by 16 miles at the widest point, or I should say 110 miles long by 16 miles wide at the widest point. And those fish seem to be in medium aggression. So when you find fish in the Sound, they're not as difficult to catch as they are when they're in the rivers in the spring. But when you get out into the ocean, you're fishing like a Montauk or a Block Island or a Cape Cod. Those fish are, I don't know if it's the oxygen, if they're migrating fish, if it's the bait that's out there, those fish are ultra aggressive. So you have, and throughout the tides and conditions, you know, some days you will find highly aggressive fish in the rivers, and other days there'll be, you know, you'll look at your sonar and it looks like it's on simulator mode because there's so many fish there and they just won't touch a thing. But fly fishing, particularly in the fall, if you have fish that are aggressive and they're blowing up on bait and they're blitzing, or like you said with finicky fish, that could be, you know, really effective.
Awesome, John. Thanks for your participation there. Hope you are keeping well. So Marco, who you just answered that one question about finicky stripers for, he said he's been using the new Spheros SW for about a week now, spooled up with 30-pound Power Pro, smooth as butter. Have you had a chance to fish the new one, Mike?
I had not fished the new Spheros. I want to because it looks awesome. I have fished the new, so I have the new Saragossa right here. And I fish a lot of the Saragosas, and this is the 6,000. I have 6 and 5,000 Saragossas, and these are phenomenal. Obviously, I've heard great things about the Spheros, and the 30-pound Power Pro. I particularly like the Super Slick. I have 50 on here because I do fish around a lot of boulders. This would be the setup when I'm throwing. This is the big splash walk. And if I'm throwing this around boulders or I'm casting live eels, I'm using the 50-pound Super Slick. But that 30-pound is a nice in between the light line and the heavy line where you get a really good, you could get good distance with that 30-pound. So that's a nice, you know, that's a great Spheros with 30-pound would be a really good setup.
Yeah, that you could handle a lot of stuff A lot of stuff with that setup. So I'm glad you're enjoying that, Marco. I mean, the beautiful thing about that new Spheros SW, obviously, it's got the Infinity Drive, which is the biggest upgrade it received this year, much like that Saragossa got. That Infinity Drive, just load, power, like smoothness under load. It's pretty impressive little reel.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about stripers a little bit. We've talked about Albies. Let's talk about those blues, those blitzing blues that, as Blaine calls them, yellow-eyed devils.
Yeah. Bluefish are great. So this is great. It was very well said because we had last week we were fishing deep water. We were diamond jigging out in like 100 feet of water, and we were catching 10 to 15 pound bluefish. You want to talk about a ferocious tackle busting animal? They'll destroy everything. I mean, I have these Colt sniper jigs with no paint on. I mean, this one's got. I have one that have no paint, and they still hammer the thing. And it was funny. So he said this. I thought this was a great quote. He goes, "If you took bluefish and you put him if you found him in a South American river somewhere, you guys would go pay $20,000 to go on a trip and go fly cast them because they really are for sport fish. They do everything you want them to do. They bite, they jump, they're aggressive, they're fantastic fish. Some people don't like them because either they're not that well." Depending on your taste, some people would say they're not edible because they're fishy, right? And if you're trying to bass fish, they destroy all your tackle. So if you're throwing soft plastics, they have this thing. It's like a radar for soft plastics. Guarantee if there's a bluefish around, the second this thing hits the water, it will be bit in half. It's amazing how they. And then obviously your fluorocarbon leaders are going to destroy all that. When we jig, so there's two ways now for surface feeding blues. I would throw metal. Obviously, keep your soft plastics away from them. But I throw the small metal, cast the small metal. Definitely want the single hook for the blues. But if we're deeper water fishing, we're jigging. This is the bigger Colt sniper jigs. This is the 100 gram or a 120 gram, and we're vertical jigging these. And what we're doing is dropping them to the bottom. Just coming off the bottom so you're not hanging, especially if you're fishing a rocky reef. You don't want to be hanging up. But we're doing the technique, which would be called it could be called yo-yoing. So we're ripping the rod up and following the jig with the rod tip. So we're letting that jig free fall, and it's gonna flutter like this. So we're letting it free fall, but we have the rod tip is dropping at the same speed of the jig. So we're not letting the line slack up because 2/3 of your bites will come as that jig is going back to the bottom. And then, once you get the rod tip down to the water, you're going to rip the rod back up and just up and down. That it's a really effective technique for the smorgasbord, really for stripers, blues, black sea bass. It's deadly. And also we've actually done it on bonita and albies as well, and caught them vertical jigging, which not a lot of people do. But you do have to be careful because the blues are such savages that you'll drop a jig down and just reel up, and everything will be gone. They'll bite your hole. They just hit the braid. So
it sounds like they're the northern pike of the ocean.
Yeah, so you got to watch you don't get too much slack in the line when that jig is falling, because if a fish goes and hits it, it'll just bite right through your braid, and you'll lose everything. Yeah.
So interestingly enough, I spoke to Blaine about this, and I truly believe it's because they don't eat well. Mm-hmm. Is probably the reason why so many. It's kind of like sheephead in freshwater or freshwater drum. It does everything you want it to do. It'll hit artificial baits. It pulls like a freight train, but they're ugly and they don't eat well. But I told Blaine, I said, I spent a summer shooting a fishing show down in New York called Pesca. And it was David Pasternak, the chef from New York City, who loves to fish. So they'd go blue fishing in Long Island Sound, and they'd catch one. They killed a couple and took them back to eat them. And I told Blaine this. He's like, nope, don't believe it. And I've actually tried. He made bluefish ceviche.
Okay.
And it's all how you clean the fish, right? If you get rid of that bloodline in them, that's where all the bad taste is coming from. And then another one, they did a grilled bluefish at one of the restaurants, and it was unbelievable. I think it's more in the preparation of the fillets than it is anything else, and maybe they're a bit more work. Where I will say a striper tastes pretty good.
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny. I was in a restaurant in Newport, Rhode Island, like a month or two ago, and they had smoked bluefish pate. And I've heard people rave about this. I'm like, all right, we have to get it. And it was actually phenomenal. Did not, and I
Seaplane?
don't like fishy tasting fish. However, I will say this. I think it may have been 1 part bluefish and 9 parts mayonnaise and whatever else was in it. But it was really good. Yeah.
Well, there's your first tip right there. Bleed them
Bleed them.
immediately.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it's true. Like anything like that, bleed them and then cut the dark meat out of the fillet because they have a big bloodline in them, right? There's a lot of fish that have that, and I'm with you. I cannot stand fishy tasting fish. Like I don't like mackerel, anything like that, right? Anything that oily. I like things that are like taste like meat to
Yeah.
me.
Oh yeah.
So. Here's a question about the Terramar Double X as a dock rod. So for those of you who don't know, a dock is much like we've got our splash walk. It's a topwater walking the dog bait. So what model would you recommend, Double X?
Yeah.
Terramar Double X?
So I have the rod downstairs. I didn't bring it up.
That's all right.
It's the heavier one. It's the 7-foot. I believe it's a medium heavy. The conventional's the heavy. It's the it's the Northeast. It's very similar to the conventional one.
You're using an 844 there, right? That's the 844?
This is a phenomenal rod, and they're nearly the same, very similar action.
7-foot heavy. That's a 7-foot heavy.
Yep. It's an 844 SMF. This is the IMX Pro Blue. And the Terramar Double X is pretty much the same. They're very similar rods. It's the same action. They're both great dock rods, great for throwing the splash walk as well. But for big spooks, I use that I usually use a Saragossa 6,000 or 5,000. I do run the 50-pound braid because we do fish around a structure. So I run the 50-pound Power Pro Super Slick. But this is a great rod for that. Also, if you cast live eels at all, this is a phenomenal rod. You can't say enough good things about this rod. It's great.
So what are the attributes, Mike, that you look for in a like a cold sniper splash walk, like a walk the dog style bait, whether it's a dock or a splash walk?
Yep.
What attributes are you looking lengthwise? Are you stuck to that 7 foot? You like the shortness so you can work downwards with it?
Yes. Yep. So I do like throwing a 7-foot rod. Couple reasons. One is I feel like I'll fish up to a 7.5 footer. But when you go to 7.5, I find that the rods in the boat, they become a little long. They get and I have a real short. I don't have a big T-top or anything. I have a short, clean. My boat's set up for guiding. But even still, long rods, I find people have harder time casting them. They're harder to manage, harder to land the fish because the fish is further away from you. Also, I'd like the lightness. I mean, I think this rod casts as far as you need to cast. Also, so in terms of working up or down, typically if at the end of my cast, because you could launch these splash walks like a country mile on this rod. At the end of the cast, I'll work with the tip up. That'll help to keep the line out of the water. So if you're fishing in an area like the river with this current, you don't get that big, it's almost like mending the line. Like you don't want that big curve in the line because it'll make the lure kind of pull across the water surface a little too fast. So I'll work with the rod tip up. And then once I'm about maybe 2/3 of the way in, I'll go to the lower position and work low. And the reason why you want to do that is towards the end of the retrieve. If your rod tips up, your line angle is going to be too steep. Also, and this will happen, they will hit these lures right next to. They will hit them so close that they will scare you. You're ready to pull the rod out of the. It's like a muskie almost. You know, they'll hit it right boat side, and it's really dangerous if you have a rod tip up and you get hit and that rod loads, and then that lure pops out. It could come flying back. It could hit someone in the boat. You could hit yourself in the face. So when the spook's near the boat, always with the rod tip down.
And interestingly enough about that, I haven't had a chance to work one, but I did the video for it. And I know that they tail weighted that thing because I have fished docks with Blaine, and man, they blow docks clean out of the water.
Oh yeah,
you know, they hit them from underneath, and that bait goes. I got slow-mo video of the bait doing somersaults. What is it that they did to this bait to try to help that? Oh, I lost your audio there, Mike. Nope. there we go. I hear it now.
How about now? Good.
Yeah, I got
I
you.
think I hit it with the rod. Yeah. So this splash mark is going to sit tail down. That will help prevent the lure from getting blown out of the water, which should result in a little bit better hookup percentage. And again, with this one, if you did want to, you could replace this with a big 7.0 inline hook as well. But really, the action of this now, it does have the concave face in front. So that will splash some water as well, which is unique for a spook. So it'll almost push water like a popper. And again, it's that walk the dog. You can really get that to glide side to side. You could work it tighter and almost bring it in like a pencil like this. But I like to do that wide zigzag. I find that gets striped bass to react the most is when you could really walk that side to side. You may even once in a while want to just stop it and just let it sit for a second. But typically they'll hit it a few times before they actually get hooked. And sometimes I do think stripers do. Actually, yesterday on this lure, we hooked the striper in the tail on that light E6X rod and reeled it in backwards. And what I think was happening is I think the thing actually went to tail slap it to try to stun the bait, and it just ended up getting hooked in the tail when it did it. But they will try to stun baits first and then eat them after they stun them. They do that when we live line bunker all the time.
Now I know bone is a big color in that area. That northeast bone color is just like the game. But is there times where you throw something different? Because I know there's 6 colors in the splash walk. But have you thrown bunker? Because I know they make a bunker one.
Yep. I think that's the bunker pattern.
That's the bunker color. Yeah.
Yep. So I use the bunker color. You can't go wrong with bone. I mean, it really does work good. You got to remember that. With a surface lure, I don't believe the fish ever sees the back of the lure. At least I don't see how they could. I mean, I don't know, because they're hitting it from,
underneath,
not above, right? So they're seeing that right there. And every bait fish in the world has a lighter color belly. So I think that's a good silhouette. I think it's about a lot of it is your presentation, probably more so. So it's about the technique and getting it to walk right and splash. But I basically use the bone and the bunker pretty much is what I've been using.
See, I like using the bone because it's easy to track as an angler.
Yes.
It's easier to tell when they hit it, right? Like the bunker color, that bluey gray back that it has, it kind of blends into the water a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not seeing the movement of it going back and forth, creating that disturbance, it's hard to track. But the bone, when it sits there, it's like it's contrast to the water. You can actually keep a good eye on it.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a great point, is I think a lot of it's hand-eye coordination. So it's like when you're working it, especially if you're learning to do it, but you want to be watching the lure and watch how when you move the rod, watch how the lure responds to the rod movement and the cadence of the reel too. If you're reeling too fast and you're over-reeling them, you'll notice that you're not going to get that side motion. You're going to just get it almost moving straight because you're reeling the slack up so quick that you're not allowing it to walk. Or if you're pulling the lure underwater, it means that you're over. So if you watch the lure, it will tell you when
you're doing it right.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
So do you find gear ratio at all plays any part in? Because for me, I know I don't like to throw super fast reeling reels because they almost reel up too much slack, and you need that little bit of slack. The more you want your bait to slide, side to side, the more slack you need to have in your line.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you teach your clients if they've never done it before?
It's that could be a challenge. So you need a little bit of slack in between each twitch, right? To get that thing that walks at the side. And it's the same thing when you're fishing the soft plastics. A lot of people do wind them too fast and the lure just moves in a straight line. When you slow it down and you get a little bit of that slack, that's where you really get it to kick side to side. It's tough to teach somebody. It's really about the hand-eye coordination. A lot of times you got to tell them to slow it down. A lot of people tend to overwork them and they work them too hard or too fast. I think the gear ratio, the Gosa, I think, is geared right. Is this a 5.8? Is it 5.8?
Yeah, but it's more inches of line per handle turn, and I think that's probably pushing around the 40-inch mark.
Okay, all right. This is typically what I use, and I like it. I do have, and I really do like to reel a lot, the new Twin Power SW. Is that geared? I feel like it's geared fairly similar.
Yeah, all the reels they're faster. People don't realize that spinning reels are actually inches of line per handle turn talking a lot
Okay.
faster than traditional bait casting,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Like
Sure.
a
Yep.
tranks is
Yep.
quick, but it's not
Yep.
that quick.
Yep. Yeah.
All right, let's see. I'll get you the stats for the Saragossa right now, actually. So that one there is a 6,000, you said?
Yeah, I have a 5 and a 6. Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't far off. It was 41 inches of line per handle
41
turn. I thought it
inches.
was 40,
Okay.
but it's 41.
And
So
what's the
basically 41
power?
to 50 on the high end when you get to the
Okay.
big reels, like
Yep.
18,000, 14,000, 20,000.
Yep.
And if the reel has XG in the name for people who
Mhm.
are looking at their reels, which you can see that one there is an HG, I
Yep.
believe. So
This.
that should be an HG,
Yep.
6,000 HG.
This is a 5,000 XG.
Okay, so XG
Right.
means it's the faster gear ratio. HG is
Okay.
the middle gear ratio, and then
Okay.
PG is the slowest gear ratio. That's power gear.
I see. Okay, so my 6,000s are
Are
HGs,
HGs,
and
so they would be in the
is
middle. So a
XG.
5,000 and a 6,000, but they're basically the same.
Yep.
They're both 41 inches of line per handle turn. One has a better line capacity than the other.
Just a bigger spool. Yeah.
And this is a great point. Nick is saying topwater retrieves, you need to go out there and practice. Like anything.
Yeah.
It's muscle memory.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
All right, so we did a little bit about the stripers. And actually, before we leave stripers and go to the bottom fish, we might have to go to the bottom fish soon, actually. Believe it or not, Mike, we've been talking for 46 minutes.
Oh, wow. Time flies.
Folks, let me just welcome everybody who just tuned in. This is another episode of Shimano School. My name is JP DeRose. I'm here with Captain Mike Roy, and we are talking Northeast fall fisheries. So we're talking albies, we've talked bluefish, we talked stripers, and now I think we're going to take on a little bit of the bottom game that's going on in the Northeast. So tog fishing and black sea bass.
Mm-hmm.
Two fish that I have actually never had the opportunity to fish for and are definitely on my list. I think black sea bass are some of the most beautiful fish when you get those,
they're cool looking.
The black with the blue and teal in them. And so let's talk sea bass. What's the deal going on there?
Yeah, so sea bass right now is in season, and it's in season all the way through the end of the year. Sea bass are great because we have a lot of them in the Northeast now, and that's more of a recent thing that's happened within the past decade. They seem to have shifted. They used to be caught more in central East Coast, and now they've moved north. So they're very plentiful off of Connecticut, Rhode Island, New York. They taste great, and they have pretty good bag limits where you're allowed to keep it. Like in Connecticut, it's five per angler. And the great thing about sea bass fishing is, like, I hate cutting squid. It's just a disaster. I mean, it's such a mess and constantly rebaiting. But I exclusively fish jigs for sea bass. They hammer this jig. The heavier cult snipers work phenomenal. And generally, when we do the sea bass fishing, it's in deeper water. So we're typically fishing somewhere between 70 and 120 feet of water. So we're doing that around the slower currents. So at the beginning and ends of the tides. So we're timing that for that last hour or so of the tide. They're pretty aggressive fish. Sea bass will actually feed on. I mean, they feed on crabs and crustaceans, but they will actually feed on juvenile butterfish, silverside sand eel. So they'll actually be puking all that up when you catch them. It's a great setup because you could drop a jig down on a spinning rod or a conventional rod and vertical jig these off the bottom, and you'll actually catch sea bass. You'll catch bluefish as well. Sometimes as you're cranking a sea bass up, a bluefish will chomp them in half. So that does happen quite a bit.
So this jigging, is it now? There's different kinds of jigging, and Shimano's they are like all about the jigging. The systems that they've put together, from butterfly jigging rods, slow pitch jig, light jig, big heavy stuff, conventional spinning. Rods designed to move specific weight lures.
Mm-hmm.
Are you using a standard retrieve where you're butterfly jigging, or are you repeatedly bringing it in that bottom water column up and down?
It's usually more repetitive, and you could switch it up, but generally we'll just the sea bass will hit it on the way down as it's fluttering down. So we'll do more of that yo-yo technique. But you can do. There are times when you could work them through the water column, and it'll chase them up and hit them as well. But I don't think I'm as now. You could catch them on the flat fall jigs, the butterfly jigs. You know, they all work. I happen to use the Capt snipers a lot. They just produce really well in the area that I fish. But all the jigs will work really well for them.
And I'm assuming you're picking those slack tide times because of the rush of the current and your ability to keep your bait on target.
Exactly.
Would that be like the main reason why? It's funny because I know with the slow pitch game, they use a longer, more slender jig.
Yep.
And it cuts through that water better. Right? It doesn't let the current affect it. So it goes down quick and stays in there. So I like the fact that you said they'll chase, because that makes it even more fun. I mean, and this is Nick saying, yeah, vertical jigging sea bass. He loves that idea over bait. Who doesn't? When you can catch them on artificials and don't have to play the bait game. Yeah. I mean, it's so he's asking, what's the name and size of that jig you have? What size is that bigger Capt sniper?
It's a Shimano Capt sniper. It's the 100 gram. Typically in the sea bass depths we have in Northeast are either the 80 gram, 100 gram, or 120 gram. So this in ounces is I believe it's about 3.5 ounces.
It's 3 ounce. Yeah. Okay. 100 gram is 3 ounce.
Yeah.
For all the Canadians, we know grams, and for and for the Americans, it is a 3 ounce jig.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So there you have it, Nick. So Garrett has a question about that. So you remember the Lucanus jigs?
Yeah.
Do they work for you for sea bass?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I haven't fished them as much as I fish the Capt snipers, but they do work. The good thing about black sea bass, when you find them, they're usually fairly aggressive fish. So that they'll hit the Lucanus jig. I mean, you could even, the problem is water depth. You could even catch them on soft plastics if they're shallow enough. You could drop a soft plastic down there like a finesse fish as well, and they'd be all over that. But yeah,
you find, are they relating to reefs or wrecks, or are they always on structure?
Yeah, so I mean that's what makes the sea bass fishing interesting is really learning and dialing in the bottom structure. So typically they're going to be on reefs or humps where you have a depth change. And it's typically deeper water reefs, a rocky structure, anything where bait's going to concentrate. And if there's any kind of crustaceans there. So a lot of times it's real common for sea bass to be spitting up crabs. So any like kind of bottom structure that's going to have crabs and bait around it is usually going to be a good sea bass spot.
Interesting. Yeah, I definitely got to give that a go one day, because that seems like it would just be a whole lot of fun and some great eating as well, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. One of the best. Yeah.
All right. And then, so your setup when you're jigging, what are you using?
So I typically use, I'm all about quick transitions when I'm guiding. So I'm not going to retie and when I'm switching to sea bass. So it'll just be a matter of
844 again.
This is the 844 with Saragossa, and I have a breakaway clip on there, and I'll just pop this clip off and put that Capt sniper on there, and we'll be jigging and catching fish. But the reason why I do use the heavier, now obviously you could be more technical, and you can use a jigging rod for this as well. But I'm all about, I carry 13 rods on my boat. So it's like I have 4 of these. I have 4 of the light rods. I have 4 or 5 conventional. So it's kind of just really about, for me, it's about easy transitions. I use the heavier rods because it's deeper water and there's always bluefish around. And the blues wreak havoc on your tackle. So you can jig with the light E6X rods and like a 4,000 Stratic, which would be a lot of fun, and light line. You could use 15-pound braid, which would cut the water better. You could use a lighter jig. But if there's bluefish around, they're going to start biting you off and
it's like sharks on snappers down in Florida, right?
Yeah,
same thing.
So yeah, you want to try to get it, keep them away from the blues and try to reel them up, nice and smooth. You don't want to horse them up because you'll pull a lot of hooks out. But also, you got to be mindful that there are a lot of bluefish around them at times.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, there you go, folks. That's all about your black sea bass. And the last one, as we round this thing up, tog. Let's talk about tog a bit.
Yeah. Blackfish or tog, they kind of have like a cult-like following. again, it's one of those things. It's just really the fall season is the time to target them. It opens October 10th in Connecticut waters, and goes through the end of November. I think it's November 28th. So usually it's good from opening day through mid-November. And what makes them exciting is I think that they're a catchable fish. So all you need to do is find rock structure, and you can catch them shallow. The beginning of the season when the water's still warmer, you could catch them in 10 feet of water. You could also catch them out in deeper water as well. But what's nice about the black fish compared to the sea bass, you don't have to go out to 100 feet of water to catch them. You anchor up, or I use a Minn Kota trolling motor, which is the way to do it because you just spot lock on them. Makes it super easy. But you find rock structure, and it's all crabs. They don't really hit artificials, so you're using either an Asian crab or a green crab on either if you're shallow, you can use a jig. So they actually make tog jigs that have a short shank hook. Or you would use a traditional bottom fish rig with a loop for a sinker and a small like octopus style hook. So depending on water depth and current, you'd use, if it's deeper, stronger current, you use the traditional bottom fish rig. And that I would be using, again, like a Torium 14 with that Terramar or a Loomis. You probably want like a 3 or 4 power. It is fun. Like you could use, I have a Calcutta 400. You could use that on like one of the 3 power IMX rods, which would give you a nice little feel, especially if you're using like the little tog jigs. But if you're in deeper current or heavier current, deeper water, more structure, you might want to use a little bit heavier tackle for them. They do fight similar to a grouper. So you do muscle. It's kind of a bulldog. You hook them, and as soon as you hook them, you got to lift your rod tip up and start cranking. And that most important part is that first 10 feet and just getting them away from the rocks, because they will bury themselves in the rocks. And once they do, it's usually pretty hard to get them back out. Yeah.
So Nick's actually asking, do you ever see sheephead up here? He says he's been seeing a great resurgence in New Jersey.
Actually, I've never caught a sea bass in the Sound. I don't know if we ever get them.
Sheephead. Yeah,
sheep's head. Sorry,
sheep's head.
Yep, yeah.
The barred ones.
Yeah, I've never caught them here. I get New Jersey. You do get a little bit different. I think once you hit Long Island and you come around into what's New England, I think we have a little bit. In Jersey, you do see more southern fish. Like I think you do get more weak fish there. You do get red drum occasionally. You'll get occasional cobia, more so than we would see. So it doesn't surprise me that you would see more of those in the New Jersey area.
Yeah, for sure. And good eating, actually. Sheephead, really, really good eating as well. All right, so we have hit the 58-minute mark. So, folks, if you got any questions, I would strongly suggest you do that in the next couple of minutes. Pop them up, and we'll get Captain Mike to give his best at it. Mike, while we were talking about the tog, heavier line because you're playing that tug of war, is it like a 50-pound Power Pro kind of deal?
Yeah, I generally use 50-pound Power Pro. Again, I probably simplify it just because of the amount of setups that I carry on the boat. But you do get some benefits. You could use lighter. Like if I'm shallow, you could actually fish the tog jigs on a light setup with like 20-pound braid or 30-pound braid, which is nice. It's fun. You get nice feel with the light line. It cuts the water better. You just got to be careful if they do get in the rocks. That the lighter the line is going to break a little easier than the heavier line.
Yeah, it's that good old tug of war that you get with just about every saltwater fish. So there you have it, folks. That is another edition of Shimano School. Captain Mike, thank you very much for joining us tonight. You are a wealth of knowledge. Loved having this chat with you.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. It was great. Obviously always happy to do this anytime.
So, folks, we got one last one here. John, I'm going to take your question, but let me wrap things up, and then we're going to take your question. So, folks, for those of you who are watching this, these are going to live on both our YouTube and Facebook channels. So, please do us a favor. Watch them. Tag a buddy in the comments. Share them for us. It helps us get the word out. And let's get to our last question of the night before we get things going. I'm just happy we didn't have a tornado. John is asking for stripers. Is a Stratic FL3000 too small? Do I need to upsize, or can I use my existing 3000s?
No, that's a great reel. You could use a 3, 4, or 5,000. 3,000 is a little bit smaller body than the 4 and 5, but yeah, absolutely, that'd be a great finesse reel with. You could have 15-pound Power Pro Super Slick and use that for throwing the small soft plastics or the smaller spooks on there, and it'd be a good setup for that.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal redfish reel. I mean, it's one of my number one smallmouth reels. I mean, that is a jack of all trades for sure. All right, and then last one, we're going to get another push for your business. Nick, you're very welcome. He's saying, does Mike have a website for his charter business?
Yep, yeah, absolutely. So it's realcastcharters.com. So real spelt with 2 E's. So again, it's realcastcharters.com.
Awesome. There you go. All right, folks. Thanks again for joining us for another Shimano School. We'll be back in 2 weeks. And I believe we're doing the flip-flop. So it's saltwater, freshwater, saltwater, freshwater. There is so many things to fish for in North America that this is, we can do this forever and ever and never touch the same thing twice. So thanks everybody very much for joining us. I hope you're all keeping well and safe. And I hope you guys are catching tons of fish. We will see you in a couple weeks. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Thanks.